It began like any other taping day at The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, a liberal-leaning audience filling the studio, the band warming up, and the host reviewing his monologue. But this time there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Tonight's guest wasn't a Hollywood star or a Democratic senator. It was the righteous American pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, the renowned spiritual leader known for his message of hope and prosperity, and one of the most recognizable spiritual voices in America. He had agreed to appear on host Jon Stewart's show after a week of back-and-forth negotiations. The premise? A conversation about faith in the modern world, the role of spirituality in public life, and how media shapes narratives around belief. But both sides knew this wasn't going to be a simple chat. It was a clash of worldviews, optimism versus cynicism, dressed up in late-night wit. The teaser clip host Jon Stewart's team posted earlier that morning had already stirred up a storm. In it, host Jon Stewart looked into the camera and said with a smirk, "Tonight, the master of positive thinking himself is here to tell us why everything's going to be okay, as long as you keep believing and maybe buying his books." The clip ended with studio laughter, but Twitter erupted. Osteen's followers called it a cynical trap. Critics said they couldn't wait to see his positive facade crack. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen saw the clip on his way to the studio in the back of a black SUV. He rewatched it 3 times, his serene expression unwavering, but a subtle determination in his eyes. His team had warned him, "It's a trap. He's going to mock you, corner you, edit it however he wants." But the pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't care. "Let them try," he said, pulling a small, leather-bound Bible from his bag and tucking it into his blazer. "They think I came to play defense. I didn't. I came to share the message." As he entered the CBS building, camera crews tracked his every step. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, a lapel pin depicting a dove gleaming under the lights, the same polished, approachable look he wore on stage at Lakewood Church. Host Jon Stewart, in contrast, wore a grin. "He's about to step into the cynicism machine," he whispered to his producer backstage. "Let's see if the message of hope can stand up to reality." The studio lights dimmed. The opening music played. The crowd cheered as host Jon Stewart took his seat behind the desk. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a special guest. He's charismatic, he's polarizing, and he definitely has devoted followers and fervent critics. Please welcome the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen." Applause echoed, though mixed with murmurs. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman stepped out confidently as he sat across from host Jon Stewart. Their gazes met, 2 distinct worldviews preparing to engage. And in that instant, before a single word was spoken, the air tightened with the promise of something truly revealing. This wasn't just late-night TV, it was a clash of ideologies. And the pastor, television preacher, and businessman was ready to deliver a different kind of sermon. The band faded out, the applause simmered, and for a few seconds there was only silence between host Jon Stewart and the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, 2 professionals trained in verbal combat, seated under the bright, unflinching lights of American television. Host Jon Stewart leaned forward first, his expression a practiced mix of earnestness and irony. "Pastor," he began, "thank you for joining us. I know this isn't exactly a Sunday service." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman gave a half smile. "I'm comfortable wherever truth is sought." The audience gave a polite chuckle, unsure who just scored the first point. Host Jon Stewart tilted his head. "So let's get right into it. Pastor, you've been accused of peddling a message that can sometimes feel detached from reality, a prosperity gospel that promises wealth and health if people just believe hard enough. Critics say it preys on vulnerable people. Should I go on?" The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't flinch. "You can go on, host, but it won't make the message less true." Host Jon Stewart cracked a grin. "See, that's what I find fascinating, Pastor. No matter how clear the suffering, the poverty, the everyday struggles are, you find a way to preach boundless optimism with unshakable conviction." Laughter rippled through the crowd, emboldening him. "You've said that God wants everyone to be successful and prosperous. Is there a point where that message becomes less about spiritual well-being and more about, well, material gain for the church?" The pastor, television preacher, and businessman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Absolutely, host. If success means inspiring millions to live with faith and purpose, then yes, we have countless testimonies right here." He tapped the inside pocket of his blazer, but didn't pull anything out yet. Host Jon Stewart raised an eyebrow. Okay, so you're saying that when people are facing job loss, health crises, or systemic injustice, the answer is always just think positive, or God will provide, without addressing the tangible suffering? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman's tone sharpened. You're talking about negativity, host. I'm talking about the power of faith to transform lives, to give strength in adversity, and to inspire people to overcome. But go ahead, quote the cynical critics instead of the millions whose lives have been changed. The room tensed. Host Jon Stewart's practiced grin faltered briefly. Then he turned to the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, we've entered the hope zone, or maybe the dodge zone, he pivoted. You've often critiqued what you call negative or cynical media. Do you think there's a point where demanding relentless positivity becomes an avoidance of necessary truths or critical accountability? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't blink. No, host, I'll walk it forward. When media outlets focus solely on what's broken, amplify fear, and dismiss genuine spiritual solutions as naive or simplistic, yes, that harms people. You may scoff, but I've spoken with countless individuals who found their way through despair only by choosing faith over the relentless negativity you often present. The crowd murmured. Host Jon Stewart tried to recover. That's a powerful accusation. You think I promote despair? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman leaned in. Not just you, host, but a pervasive culture of cynicism certainly plays its part. The temperature in the room shifted. Host Jon Stewart shifted in his seat, glancing at the prompter. He had prepared witty takedowns, but the pastor, television preacher, and businessman wasn't engaging in political debate. He was flipping the tone from satire to spiritual conviction. Let's pivot, Host Jon Stewart said. You've been criticized for your close ties to political figures, often avoiding direct criticism of their actions. Do you think a spiritual leader has a responsibility to speak truth to power, even when it's uncomfortable? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman's lips tightened. You want to talk about responsibility, host? Let's talk about the responsibility to foster unity and hope rather than division and despair. But we both know you're often more interested in dissecting flaws than in building solutions. The crowd murmured again. Host Jon Stewart took a breath. You know, some might say that's a clever way to avoid the question. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman finally reached into his blazer. And some say it's time to stop calling genuine faith naive just because it's inconvenient to a cynical worldview. Want to hear what countless lives transformed actually say? He held up the small Bible but didn't open it yet. Host Jon Stewart glanced at it, then back to the camera. Well, folks, we're just getting started, but anyone watching could already feel the pastor, television preacher, and businessman wasn't here to be a comedic foil. The lights buzzed overhead, and for a moment, the studio audience wasn't sure whether to laugh, clap, or simply stare. Host Jon Stewart's grin was thinning. His usual sarcastic jabs weren't landing like they used to. Not against this guest. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen wasn't playing the role he'd cast for him. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't defensive. He was serene and something deeply convicted, prepared. Host Jon Stewart cleared his throat. Let's talk about what you just held up. That little book. You seem eager to make your case, Pastor. Go ahead, enlighten us. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman opened the Bible calmly. This is from the Word of God, he said, his voice resonating. From Philippians 4-13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This isn't about politics or sides, host. This is about the strength countless people find daily. Host Jon Stewart leaned back, his smirk fading into something resembling concern. So your argument, Pastor, is that every problem can be overcome with a Bible verse? My argument, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman said slowly, is that hope has been buried under headlines crafted to amplify despair, and that faith has been dismissed by those who choose cynicism. A few audience members clapped. The rest stayed silent. Host Jon Stewart pressed, but what about the real struggles, Pastor? The systemic issues? Does faith alone solve a poverty or discrimination? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman turned to him. Host, are you saying that focusing on personal spiritual growth negates the need for compassion or action? Or that only your preferred secular solutions are valid? Host Jon Stewart's face stiffened. So it's just about personal belief now? I'm saying, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman replied, it's convenient how some media overlooks the power of individual transformation when it suits a narrative of societal brokenness. The studio grew still. Host Jon Stewart reached for his mug, buying time. All right, he said, raising his eyebrows. Let's take a breath. But the pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't let up. You asked me here to share my message, and I will. But I won't sit here while you throw cynical jabs and pretend it's insight. You want to talk about what truly impacts people? Let's talk about how much negativity is broadcast daily, how hope is often ridiculed, and how the media often profits from division rather than unity. The crowd murmured. Someone audibly said, he's not wrong. Host Jon Stewart opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, the late-night host had no punchline ready. The silence between them was louder than any applause. I came here, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman continued, knowing you'd try to paint me as some naive optimist, a prosperity guru, as your side loves to say. But just maybe the real puppet is the one reading from scripts that amplify despair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Host Jon Stewart sat still, blinking. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman turned to the audience, his voice steady. You were promised satire tonight, but the real challenge is how long we've let cynics pose as truth-tellers and negativity masquerade as insight. That was the line. A low gasp, then a ripple of claps from the spiritual side of the audience. Then louder. Host Jon Stewart reached for a new card on his desk, but the tone of the room had already shifted. The balance of power, subtly, unmistakably, had begun to lean in his favor. This wasn't going to be another Jon Stewart takedown. This was the beginning of the pastor, television preacher, and businessman's counteroffensive, and he was just getting started. The moment the pastor, television preacher, and businessman's final line left his lips, the studio didn't know how to respond. It was as if someone had thrown a stone through a glass window of expectation. Even host Jon Stewart, typically the maestro of turning awkward silences into laughs, sat stiff behind his desk. His hand twitched toward the cue cards, but his eyes betrayed what his rehearsed smile tried to hide. He had lost the beat of the show. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't gloat. He didn't flash a smirk or soak in the applause. He simply leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs, calm as ever, as if he knew this exact moment was coming. And outside that New York City studio, the moment exploded. Clips of his biblical references, his challenge to cynicism, and his now impactful line, the real challenge is how long we've let cynics pose as truth-tellers and negativity masquerade as insight. Hit X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok within minutes. On spiritual and family values accounts, the video spread like wildfire, posted with captions like, Pastor Osteen just evangelized Stewart live. Faith flipped the late-night script. He walked into the cynicism machine and walked out with souls. On X, the hashtag #OsteenFlips. The script rocketed to the top 5 trends in under 30 minutes. A side-by-side meme of the pastor, television preacher, and businessman holding the Bible and host Jon Stewart, awkwardly frozen mid-reach, went viral with the caption, "You preach positivity. He brought the gospel." Inside the studio, the producers scrambled. They had planned for a clever viral takedown, one that would leave the pastor, television preacher, and businessman looking like another naive religious figure caught in the late-night headlights. Instead, they were now in damage control mode, whispering into host Jon Stewart's earpiece, signaling the team to cut early to commercial. But host Jon Stewart resisted. He leaned forward, forcing a grin. Well, Pastor, you've certainly come ready. But let me ask, do you really believe that all critical commentary is just cynicism? That we're all just trying to spread despair? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman met his gaze. I believe some people use cynicism as a shield. They hide behind sharp wit to avoid looking at deeper truths. You've critiqued faith and hope for years, host. But what happens when someone offers a different perspective without getting defensive? Host Jon Stewart blinked. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman added, "You invited me here expecting a caricature. What you got was a pastor, television preacher, and businessman. A man who's tired of being labeled, mocked, and dismissed just because I preach a message of hope and God's love." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They listened. Host Jon Stewart looked down, his usual rhythm broken. His next question was softer, more cautious. Do you think the country's too cynical to even embrace genuine hope anymore? The pastor, television preacher, and businessman paused. Only if we let cynics keep pretending they're the sole arbiters of truth. That one hurt. You could feel it. The camera operators held their shots longer than usual. One of the producers in the control room whispered, "We're losing the narrative." Backstage, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman's team, 2 young assistants, and a former ministry lead were already watching the numbers climb. The YouTube live chat was flooded with praise, fire emojis, and one-liners like, "This is why they're scared of genuine faith." By the time the commercial break finally hit, host Jon Stewart sat in silence while the pastor, television preacher, and businessman adjusted his mic. "I'm ready for more conversation," he said calmly. Host Jon Stewart forced a smile. "We'll be right back." But even he knew this wasn't a show anymore. It was a reckoning. The screen faded in from black. The band played a low, jazzy riff, and host Jon Stewart, ever the seasoned host, put on a well-practiced grin. But something had changed. The air wasn't light anymore. It wasn't punchlines and easy applause. It was tension, raw, unfiltered, and fully unscripted. He leaned into the camera, voice smooth but slightly thinner than before. "We're back with the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, spiritual leader and evidently full-time optimist," he quipped, hoping for laughs. A few chuckles came from the audience, but they were hesitant, scattered, almost guilty. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman turned toward the crowd, then calmly back to host Jon Stewart. "You know, host, when you mock what I do, you're not just mocking me. You're mocking the people I represent. Millions of Americans who find solace in faith, who don't resonate with your brand of skepticism. They're tired of their beliefs being the punchline." Host Jon Stewart blinked. "But pastor, you've got to admit that sometimes the world gives us plenty to be cynical about." "Then maybe the real challenge," the pastor, television preacher, and businessman said slowly, "is how obsessed the media is with dissecting what's wrong rather than celebrating what's right or what can be made right." That line pierced through the set. Even some of the liberal-leaning producers glanced at each other behind the cameras. Host Jon Stewart tried to move on. "All right," he said, flipping a card with slight irritation. "Let's shift gears. You preach a message of relentless optimism, pastor. Tell me, what exactly do you say to someone facing overwhelming hardship without the means to pray their way out?" He didn't flinch. "I say that faith provides strength beyond circumstances, that hope empowers action, and that true spiritual leadership never uses cynicism to distract from the potential for human resilience." Host Jon Stewart rolled his eyes. "So now, comedy is the enemy." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman leaned forward. "Negativity with a laugh track is still negativity. People think if they're chuckling, they're not being subtly drawn into despair. But cynicism with a punchline is still cynicism." The room went still again. Host Jon Stewart opened his mouth, then closed it. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman added, "You've called my message simplistic on national television, host. But all I do is bring a message of enduring truth. That hope you often scoff at? It's been verified in millions of lives. The power of prayer you brush off. Even science acknowledges its psychological benefits. So who's limiting understanding?" Host, silence. Host Jon Stewart looked off stage, clearly seeking a lifeline. The teleprompter was blank. No script for this. Backstage, Twitter was exploding. Elon Musk had retweeted a clip from the exchange with a fire emoji and 3 words, "He came ready." The original video now had over 2.3 million views just 20 minutes into airing. Fox News ran a banner, "Osteen flips late night show into a sermon." On Truth Social, a prominent spiritual figure posted, "Pastor Osteen was brilliant tonight. Took down Stewart without breaking a sweat. This is what spiritual strength looks like." Host Jon Stewart cleared his throat. "You're very confident for someone whose message is often dismissed as naive." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman smiled faintly. "Confidence comes from conviction, host. You came with jokes. I came with the word." The crowd clapped, not wildly but enough to show the balance had shifted. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman wasn't a guest anymore. He was running the room. The band played softly again, as if unsure whether they were part of a comedy show or a spiritual reckoning. And the pastor, television preacher, and businessman, he just sat there, composed, clear, and undefeated. As the stage lights softened and a new graphic flashed on the screen, host Jon Stewart attempted to steer the tone back into late-night levity. "All right," he said, adjusting his collar. "I guess this is what happens when you try to fact-check faith on air." But the damage was done. The dynamic had flipped. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't wait for the next punchline. He calmly reached into his blazer again and held up a second, worn copy of the Bible. "This is the Second Testament," he said, his voice crisp, "dated millennia ago. It confirms that true peace surpasses all understanding, Philippians 4:7, even amidst the chaos." "That's not just a message, that's a lifeline," the audience murmured. Host Jon Stewart sighed. "Pastor, you know these verses sometimes lack practical application." "That's a favorite phrase for those who fear simple truth," he replied calmly. "No context erases the pain of a broken heart, just as no context erases the longing for purpose or the search for meaning in a cynical world." Host Jon Stewart exhaled sharply. "You're not here to engage in critical dialogue, are you? You're here to deliver a sermon." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman smiled. "Funny, host, I thought that was your usual mode." The crowd gasped. The producers in the back were now texting furiously. Ratings were spiking. Real-time engagement showed over 10,000 comments pouring in on YouTube Live, but not all were in host Jon Stewart's favor. The top comment read, "He just reversed the entire power dynamic of this show. This is historic." Another said, "He didn't bring fire. He brought conviction." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman closed his Bible with the calm of someone who had just delivered a message of hope in cynical territory. His eyes met Jon's. "You've accused my message of being simplistic, host, national TV. Millions watching, you scoffed. But tonight I offered spiritual truth, and you hesitated. You called me an entertainer, but maybe you're the one echoing a script of negativity." Host Jon Stewart shifted in his seat. "You want to preach, don't you?" "No," he said, standing. "I just want America to know that not everyone succumbs to despair. Not everyone bows to the late-night narrative of cynicism." He turned to the audience. "I came here accused of being naive. I leave here sharing a message of unwavering faith. And if you think this is the last time someone like me will walk onto a show like this and speak of God's grace, you're in for a long decade of hope." The room burst into applause. Not from everyone, but from enough. Host Jon Stewart looked at the camera, speechless for the first time that night. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman walked off stage, his polished shoes clicking on the floor like punctuation marks. Outside, Fox News cameras were already rolling. A producer whispered, "We've never seen anything like that." Online, the phrase, "he flipped the script," trended #1 on X, followed by Stewart Stirred and Osteen Hope Tour. Inside the studio, host Jon Stewart took a sip of water and said quietly to the crew, "We're cutting that last segment down, way down." But it was too late. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman had taken control of the narrative, and the country had already seen it happen live. As the pastor, television preacher, and businessman stepped out of the studio into the cool New York night, the city felt different. Not because the lights had dimmed or the air had changed, but because something fundamental had shifted. Within minutes of the segment airing, social media detonated. Screens across America lit up with reposts of the moment the pastor, television preacher, and businessman stood and said, "You called me an entertainer, but maybe you're the one echoing a script of negativity." The clip hit 1 million views on X in less than 10 minutes. News Nation titled it bluntly, "Osteen inspires Stewart." Fox News pinned the segment on their homepage. Even neutral outlets like Politico posted the clip under, "Did Stewart just get outflanked?" At his ministry office, his team was watching. "Get him on the phone," a senior associate said sharply to an aide. When the pastor, television preacher, and businessman answered, his voice still buzzing from the adrenaline, the associate didn't hesitate. "That was beautiful, Pastor," he said, his tone almost uncharacteristically reverent. "You did what every person of faith dreams of, and you did it on his turf." That was Billy Graham meets social media. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman chuckled. "I figured if they're going to accuse me of being naive, I might as well bring the truth of God's word in earnest." The associate laughed. "You're not just our pastor anymore. You're our frontline evangelist." Within moments, the Lakewood Church social media posted, "Pastor Joel Osteen brilliantly shares hope with Jon Stewart. He walked into the cynicism machine and came out a beacon." The secular media will try to spin it, but millions saw the truth. Pastor Osteen is a future of faith, a true spiritual leader. The post was shared over 60,000 times in under an hour. Meanwhile, liberal commentators scrambled to contain the fallout. MSNBC's Joy Reid said the pastor, television preacher, and businessman was well-rehearsed, while CNN's Don Lemon called him a bulldozer, not a debater, but even they couldn't ignore the effectiveness of his delivery. A CNN segment admitted he knew his audience, and he used host Jon Stewart's own studio as his pulpit. Outside the studio, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman gave a brief impromptu statement to waiting reporters. "I was accused on national TV of being simplistic in my message to the American people," he said, his voice steady. "So I came with the truth, not spin, not late-night punchlines. Truth in God's word." A reporter shouted, "Do you think Jon Stewart regrets having you on?" The pastor, television preacher, and businessman smiled. "If he doesn't now, he will tomorrow morning." He turned, his black coat flowing behind him as chants began to swell from a group nearby. "Osteen! Osteen! Osteen!" He didn't wave. He didn't stop. He just walked because the war of words wasn't over. It had just begun. Backstage at CBS Studios, the mood had flipped. What began as an easy ratings grab, host Jon Stewart facing off with a rising spiritual figure, had become an uncontrolled blaze. Producers huddled in corners, whispering with headsets half raised. The post-show review room, usually buzzing with banter, now echoed with quiet tension. One assistant held up her tablet. The clip of him sharing the gospel, it's already been re-uploaded in 14 languages. Host Jon Stewart sat silently in his dressing room, not angry, not even rattled, just stunned. He watched the footage again on his phone. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman rising, holding up the Bible, his voice calm but explosive. It wasn't just that he brought conviction, it was how he delivered it. Not in a rage, not in a meltdown, but with precision. His longtime producer leaned into the doorway. "You want to do a follow-up?" Host Jon Stewart looked up. That would validate him, but deep down he knew he'd already been validated. Meanwhile, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman's team gathered in a black SUV outside, watching the reaction spread in real time. One aide handed him a phone. "Franklin Graham just texted, that was faith in action." Another, "You're trending above Taylor Swift in New York." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't smile. He was already looking ahead. "They're going to come harder next time," he said. This wasn't the knockout punch. This was the warning shot. He tapped out a single post on X. "Hope always beats cynicism. Next time, bring more than a monologue." Inside of the CBS corridors, a stagehand leaned to another. "He didn't just show up," he whispered. "He rewrote the whole segment while live." That same night, spiritual circles lit up with celebration. The Christian Post ran the headline, "Osteen just did what other pastors couldn't." Turning Point Faith's founder posted, "He's our future." Period. Even figures like Elon Musk liked a clip of the moment he called out scripted satire disguised as truth. But not everyone was cheering. A prominent progressive minister reposted the segment and wrote, "This is what happens when prosperity gospel gets airtime. Empty promises in a pretty package." To which the pastor, television preacher, and businessman replied, "Your policies collapse under sunlight. That's not my fault." The retorts surged through social media like electricity. Behind all of it, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman knew the next phase wasn't about one viral moment. It was about solidifying his message. He turned to his comms director in the car. "Get me a sit-down, not with Fox. I want Axios, PBS. Let's show them I don't just clap back. I build arguments for hope." This wasn't just press anymore. This was positioning. And the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had just walked from TV guest to movement symbol without ever raising his voice. Host Jon Stewart's fingers twitched slightly on the desk, no longer calm or collected. The smirk that had defined his posture earlier in the segment was gone, replaced by something closer to discomfort. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's line, "You've called my message simplistic, but maybe you're the one echoing a script of negativity," wasn't just a jab, it was a detonation. The studio fell into a dense silence that even the cameras seemed hesitant to break. Host Jon Stewart leaned forward, trying to recover. "Pastor," he began, voice cooler than before, "this is a satirical news show. We don't operate under pulpit standards. Everything said here is commentary often exaggerated for comedic effect. That's the point. But the pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't blink. There's a difference between satire and spreading despair, he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. When you constantly highlight only what's broken, ridicule sincere belief, and millions begin to internalize that cynicism, that's not comedy, that's diminishing hope. A few people in the front row clapped cautiously, but the room had shifted. The mood wasn't light anymore. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman had turned the segment into something sharper. Not a comedy routine, but a live confrontation. Host Jon Stewart reached for humor again. "Well, if challenging the status quo is a crime, then lock me up," he quipped, grinning. But the pastor, television preacher, and businessman shook his head. "If cynicism is the excuse for dismissing genuine hope, then someone's got to speak up. That's why I'm here." Then he raised a tablet from the table beside him. With a swipe, a clip rolled behind him on the screen. Host Jon Stewart's show from a few months ago. In the segment, he showed a clip of the pastor, television preacher, and businessman speaking about overcoming adversity through faith. But in the full unedited version now playing, the pastor's message was clearly about resilience and inner strength, not a promise of material gain, and included a call to community service that was omitted. The distortion undeniable. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman turned back to him. "You built a whole segment around a message that was never even delivered the way you portrayed it. Millions watched that and believed it. You didn't correct it. You monetized the skepticism." Host Jon Stewart sat still, his eyes narrowing. The audience didn't laugh. No cheers, no chants, just the weight of the footage echoing behind them. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman took a breath, calm but resolute. "I've been sharing this message for decades, and maybe you think it's easy to dismiss, but hope matters to people like me, to Americans watching who are tired of being mocked for their faith, misled by constant negativity, and misrepresented for their beliefs." And for the first time all night, host Jon Stewart had nothing to say. The silence was louder than any applause that could have followed. Host Jon Stewart leaned back, visibly unsettled as the clip behind the pastor, television preacher, and businessman faded to black. The air in the studio was thick, not with laughter, but with something rare for late-night television: accountability. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply looked across the stage at a man who had built his brand on mockery, now confronted with the consequence of that very brand. "You have a platform most Americans can only dream of," he said, his voice steady. "But instead of using it to inspire honest reflection, you distort, you mock, you reduce everything to a punchline." Host Jon Stewart exhaled sharply, still trying to regain control. "So now I'm responsible for how people interpret their own lives?" he said, his tone wavering between sarcasm and defense. "No," the pastor, television preacher, and businessman replied. "You're responsible for how you shape perception. You know how powerful your platform is, and you know when a critique is just a critique and when it's a weapon against faith." The audience was no longer watching a segment. They were witnessing a confrontation that had peeled away the facade of studio polish. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman had come not to debate but to reveal, and he had done just that. Then he turned slightly, addressing the camera directly. "For the people watching at home, this isn't about defending a politician. This isn't about partisanship. This is about the power of hope and the truth of faith. And every time you let someone diminish your spirit in the name of entertainment, they'll do it again." He paused for a beat. "So don't just chuckle, ask questions, seek the full message, find the deeper context. Don't let your spirit be shaped by people who think hope is optional." That final line hung in the air like a closing gavel. Host Jon Stewart didn't respond. He stared at him, not with anger, but with the look of someone who realized for once he was no longer in control of the narrative. The camera cut to black. But in that silence, the internet was already erupting. Within hours, clips of the exchange would flood Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags like #Team Osteen inspired, #Hope over cynicism, and #Truth over comedy would trend worldwide. And the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, once dismissed as too optimistic, too polished, or too focused on prosperity, had done what few had ever dared. He'd walked into the cynicism machine and made the host blink. That was an incredible confrontation. Whether you sided with Jon Stewart's cynicism or were inspired by Joel Osteen's unwavering message of hope, one thing is clear: the late-night script was flipped live. What do you think? Did Osteen's conviction effectively shut down Stewart's satire? Or was it a clever deflection from the core questions? Let us know your take in the comments below. If you found this breakdown of the ideological clash compelling, don't miss our future deep dives into media, politics, and culture. Be sure to like this video, share it with a friend, and hit that big red subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you won't miss the next time someone tries to challenge the narrative. Thanks for watching.